Well, how about that? A little Lady Luck on the Jazz side of things. Lottery night here for you in Locked on Jazz Central. Here's why, guys. I had my son do the following for me. We'll go Jazz, and on the back he wrote, I don't know if you can see that, good luck, Jazz. For those of you on the podcast, audio podcast version of that, that was a nice little Jazz note he made for me today as good luck that I took with me and had around rubbing, holding on to, wishing upon luck, and we got it. Third pick of the draft. It's huge. Let's talk about the implications of this. First off, it's enormous because with this draft, talking to everyone around the league, it's not a good draft. That's what everyone's talked about. You're going to get players who can play but who are not huge impact players. And, quote, unless you win the lottery, was what one of them said, unless you get in the top 3 of the lottery. So the Jazz now have a chance to go get a player who is a impact player, something that simply they really didn't have a chance to get beforehand. And if you remember earlier this year, and I don't think this draft is so good that all these numbers hold, but if you remember earlier this year, we posted kind of the history of the NBA draft and how teams do and all the rest of that. And if you look back since 1997, if you're going to get an all-star player, you got a 31% chance if you pick 1 from 5. You've got a 20% chance if you pick 6 through 10. So you've got and if you're trying to get a starter, you've got a 62% chance picks 1 through 5 and a 44% chance in picks 9 through 10. Only 9%, by the way, of picks 11 through 15, which is the Jazz other pick, end up being starters in the NBA. So a huge jump for the Jazz. They've got a guy. The first implication is that they will get a guy that is an impact piece. The second implication is now the Jazz have 3 cornerstone pieces to where this franchise is heading in the future. They have Derek Favors, they have Gordon Hayward, and they have whomever this newest player is going to be for the Utah Jazz. That's the biggest implication. You now have a guy, he's going to start in the NBA, he's going to be an impact player, and you have now begun to put things together. The trade for Darren Williams is now 2 number 3 picks in Favors and this guy, plus Devin Harris, who holds down the fort for whatever period of time, depending who they take. And you also have the Warriors pick coming. So the Jazz have turned this corner quite quickly. I mean, you really do start to look at the Oklahoma City Thunder approach and some of those things as how the Jazz are building this and what they're going to do. Now, what I think is an interesting implication on this is what approach the Jazz take next year. You will have 3 cornerstone pieces. Do you just roll them out there and go through some of the bodily harm and pain and losses that we saw Oklahoma City go through when they did this with Durant and Westbrook, so that these 3 guys evolve? They're probably all likely to be 21 or younger when the season starts next year. The lockout may have some impact on it. If you have a truncated season, do you suddenly make sure you just get those guys minutes, and you may really struggle because these guys aren't ready to win, but you're playing for 2 or 3 years down the road? Or on the other end, do you take the approach of, all right, well, depending on who they draft, and we'll talk about that in a second, we're going to move Millsap and try to get a Danny Granger or try to get Andre Iguodala or something and get us to be playoff ready so these guys are learning in that environment. There's a strong argument that that's a much better way to do things, but there's also the Oklahoma City model, which is now, hey, just let them go play and watch them develop. So the Jazz, they move into an impact position by getting a top 3 pick in this lottery. How it alters who they are in the future, I think, gets interesting. They have their 3rd piece of their rebuilding process now that will carry them in, hopefully, into the next generation. Couple that with the Warriors pick of next year and maybe a good Jazz pick or not. Plus, they have the 12th pick of this year. And let's make sure we don't have too many expectations on that 12th pick. There has not been a player after the 11th pick of the NBA draft. 2% are all-stars, 15% are starters, 49% are non-impact players. So let's not get too excited. A guy like Alec Burke, who's a really good athlete, and just athletically he's going to be able to stay on the floor, might be a good answer at 12. And a bunch of you are saying Jimmer. Might be. Frankly, it might be a good answer. What are the Jazz going to do at 3? First thing is they're going to get to choose. I think in likelihood, the first evaluation piece they're going to make is Brendan Knight or Kemba Walker. Walker's 6 feet tall. Knight is 6'3". Knight's 18. Walker's a little older. Walker's led his team to a championship, but Knight showed a lot of those things. I would be surprised if the Jazz sided with Kemba Walker over Brendan Knight. I think Knight's the better player. They know better than I do. Walker seems to be a little bit out of the Ben Gordon mix. Knight, I think, while he struggled early in the year at Kentucky, showed great growth signs by the end of the year, and at 3 would seemingly be a reasonable pick. The other 2 players that could get interesting here is Minnesota will probably make a decision between Derek Williams of Arizona and Enes Kanter of Turkey. Kanter's an interesting case because he's really skilled, and he's really big. Bona fide, back to the basket, big guy, down low, 6'10" with a 9-foot reach, 255 pounds. He's 18 years old. He's from a really nice family in he was born in Switzerland, but he's played most of his in Turkey. But he has not played in much of the last 2 years. And so that's going to be interesting on him. And what I'm hearing on Kanter from people around the league is that he will not, or is at least unwilling to, work out with other players. So that's going to be a very difficult decision on the Jazz part of whether or not they think how they evaluate him and what they think of him. The other player I would keep an eye on, I don't think you could take him at 3, but Jan Vesely, who I scouted, I think is an interesting player. But I would still, Brendan Knight is my guess. That's immediately what I tweeted afterwards. 18-year-old, 6'3", 185 pounds. A lot to change between now and then. He's supposed to be a high-character guy and fits a lot of what the Jazz are talking about and how the Jazz are looking for things. So, really, fabulous day for the Jazz. Another piece to the puzzle for the future, which I think is very, very positive. The latest mock drafts out, Chad Ford has the Jazz taking Chris Singleton at 12, who is a pretty interesting player. He's 6'9", 225, heck of an athlete, decent shooter on the outside at times last year. Shot, I think, about 37% from 3. I kind of like him. He's played 3 years at Florida State. Last year, I think, was 13.7 rebounds and jumped. He was one of those guys that jumps off the screen when you watch him. You know that he is that good a player. Jimmer Fredette is, according to Draft Express, could drop as far as some of the 20s. I think when he starts working out, he'll do better. He's going 13 as of right now on Chad Ford's board. Alec Burks, that nice little athlete out of Colorado, is all the way up to 10. And it'll be interesting to see the rebounder out of Morehead State probably is on the board for the Jazz. You're really looking for kind of a fit piece. And 15 in this draft is probably the equivalent of 20s in some other drafts, so I wouldn't get that excited about it. And that's why moving into the top 3 and being able to put themselves in this type of position, a huge, huge day, all because of this. Way to go, boy. All right, that is your lottery reaction, quick take podcast, and YouTube. Hope you're good.